Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing an astrology report for the month of August, about the kind of themes that the astrology is highlighting for the month, along with some key dates where important changes will be taking place, and giving an overview of what it all means. Before I do that though, I just want to clarify, as I always do, that the astrology doesn't control our lives. It gives us a framework to help us understand what's unfolding around us. It helps us to recognise or be aware of where the opportunities for growth are and the kind of spiritual lessons for us to be learning are at this time. But for anything to actually change or for us to grow in line with the astrology, it requires that we participate in the process and we seek to go with the flow of the astrology rather than trying to fight against it, and use wisdom to guide our actions so that we make choices that do not create karma for ourselves. Now, in terms of the astrology for August, I'll just begin with the kind of themes that the sun is highlighting to us. But overall, the first half of the month is all about understanding who we are, so it's learning about the art of being. And from that point, it's about allowing the creative ideas or creative visions to flow within us and to take action or apply that creativity to start working on something creative without really worrying about the finishing product. Because when the sun moves into Virgo later on, which will be the 23rd of August, that's when we start using the Virgo's energy of refinement to transform into the finished product, if you like, or transform into something that is useful and can be given as an act of service, if you like. So for the first just over 3 weeks of August, the sun's transit through his home sign of Leo means it's all about learning how to just be who we are. Because Leo has two sides to it, if you like, or two ends of it. On the one hand, if we're operating from the ego, so the shadow side, if you like, then we're more likely to engage in things like a need for validation, to engage in people pleasing, and a deep-seated fear of rejection. And it's also about a need to try and dominate, so to be the one who shines brighter than everyone else, or conversely, maybe someone who tries to hide away in the shadows out of shyness. So those are the shadow sides. So the higher levels of Leo embody the best qualities that we have. So it's qualities like, so it basically comes from shining our light. So the kind of qualities that emerge, capacity to love freely, to give and receive unconditionally, and the capacity to uplift other people by virtue of our very presence. So it's radiating that authentic spirit, that authentic sense of self, and in the process of doing that, it radiates a kind of energy that uplifts others and encourages them to do the same. So it's important that we're not trying to meddle in other people's lives, we're not trying to push them to do something before they're ready. It's instead, rather than telling people what to do, it's more about embodying the best qualities of us. So qualities like love, kindness, mercy, compassion, and that benevolent spirit, that willingness to, or that magnanimous attitude where we're not focused on revenge or getting even about something that's in the past. We let go of it, we don't hold on to it, and instead we radiate that loving generosity of spirit and that emotional warmth, that playful energy, and that spontaneity that allows us to embrace the joys of life. Because when we do manifest the higher levels of Leo, i.e. we're being who we are, then love and joy naturally flow from us, because we're not anything around things like fear and or anxiety or anything like that. That all comes from the conditioned side of ourselves. We're not innately fearful, we weren't born full of fear, it's learned. So part of the process, or part of the journey through a zodiac every year, is about unlearning the fear-based behaviours and attitudes or beliefs that we held on to. Is about releasing the past and instead learning to live in the present moment. And in Leo, that involves embracing play again if we've denied that side of ourselves. It's about embracing spontaneity, embracing self-expression, and embracing creativity in all its different forms. Because creativity isn't defined by, it's not doesn't fit into narrow parameters. It's not something you can just box in. It comes in many different forms, and we all exhibit creativity in one way or another. With some people it's creativity with words, with some it's with sounds, and with others it could be with drawing, it could be with the body like dance, or any form of self-expression that is about expressing our core nature, expressing that joy, that zest for life, that desire to enjoy life and make the most of it, to allow ourselves to enjoy the pleasures of life without going overboard with it, because we don't want to end up being nihilistic or hedonistic about things. It's more about loving life, about enjoying the journey. It's recognizing that life isn't just about duty. It's not just about what we do for other people. It's also about learning to love ourselves unconditionally as we are. It's learning to let go of who we think we are and instead be who we are, which is a naturally loving and compassionate side that emerges, and to share that with one another, to share in the joy, share in the kind of magic, if you like, of life, to share in all the wonderful things that give life meaning or allow us to enjoy the journey and share that joy with one another, because joy isn't something that gets contained, as it were. It naturally spreads outward, much like laughter. So laughter is a key medicine of Leo. It's that side, it's that capacity to laugh at ourselves, not in a self-deprecating or putting ourselves down kind of way, but just laughing at the human condition, laughing at all the kind of hang-ups that the ego would have us labour under, and just recognise none of it really matters. Life is a journey, and the most important thing we can do is love ourselves and love one another. And that's a lesson that any kind of spiritual paradigm or any kind of established spiritual literature will say that. It's about love oneself and love one another, and about honouring each other, so treating each other as we would wish to be treated. So it's extending that loving generosity to one another and embracing that creative side of that often messy process, but one that we can then work on later on. And this brings us to when the sun moves on into Virgo. Virgo is all about taking that creative energy we've unlocked in Leo and that we've been playing with, and refining it and getting really good at, or really improving what we've already done. So it's like, for example, if we're taking up painting, it's going from kind of messy basic drawings to looking at or refining our ability of how we hold the paintbrushes or how we get different effects, and applying these new skills to refine the product and become or create something that's even better. So it's about taking the initial unpolished or incomplete side and refining it, giving it that or working on improving it and mastering it, so that we can then provide a service with it, that we can turn it into something that can be useful or helpful for other people. Because at the higher end of Virgo is service, and it's understanding that service is love in action. It's like practical love, if you like. It's that kind of love where we recognise, okay, this is what a person needs, this is what we can do to help them out, provided of course the person asks for it. It's not our place to meddle with other people's lives or try to save them. It's about being willing to help one another, to share the skills that we have with one another and help each other out in any kind of areas that we could be struggling in. And it's about having that humility to recognise that none of us are perfect, none of us know everything, none of us have it all figured out. So it's more important to to embody love than it is to have a head full of information. And there's some of the things that I've had to kind of work through personally, but I won't go into much more detail than that. But essentially, with Virgo, it's learning to have that humility through recognising where certain areas of ourselves need refinement, but at the same time remembering to accept or embrace those seeming imperfections unconditionally. So we don't empower the inner critic within us. We don't allow the ego to get a foothold and to keep us playing small, or to not even attempt something because we don't think we're good enough. Because this is the shadow side of Virgo, is the desire to improve or to refine something can end up morphing into perfectionism, that unrealistic standard that we torture ourselves with, to the point that we don't even attempt to do something that is well within our ability to achieve something, because we don't believe that we're good enough, we don't believe we can ever get it perfect, we don't even try. So this is the shadow we need to be mindful of, is that inner critic. So as with Leo, spending that time with the self, spending time just being with ourselves, and just doing the inner work of recognising the internal scripts that, more often than not, it's something that we've taken in from our environment. It's not something that is natural to us, it's something that we've learned, as it were. And again, it's unlearning. It's just unlearning the critical scripts in the mind, unlearning that tendency to lambast ourselves or judge ourselves when we don't do things to a standard we expect ourselves to do. It's recognising that actually we're not perfect and we don't need to be. It actually, sometimes the imperfections are to our advantage because they keep us real, they keep us humble, and keep us relatable to one another. We're no longer judging one another because then people aren't matching a certain standard that we have in our heads. It's recognising that those standards are unrealistic. It's good to want to improve something, but if you're seeking some nebulous kind of perfection that is impossible to achieve, it creates suffering, and it creates stress, and that affects our health, which is another area of Virgo. It's about our physical and mental health. It's loving ourselves enough to nourish ourselves with the right food, nourish ourselves with the right thoughts, to exercise, to maintain the body. It's all about the habits that we use to keep ourselves strong and healthy. And if we have habits that are destructive, or if we have mental patterns that are downright damaging to self-worth, they need to be transformed. But I'll do another video on some Virgo later on when it's more relevant, as it were. In terms of other aspects taking place this week, we have, or during August, sorry, the first one, now it depends on where in the world you are, but if you're in the UK or anywhere to the east of it, we have a new moon in Leo on the 1st of August. Places like America had it in July, but this new moon in Leo is all about seeking to start new beginnings and look at making the choice in what level of Leo do we want to operate at. Do we want to operate at the shadow side, where the ego is in control and we feel insecure around other people who are shining their light, and we try to undermine them out of insecurity? Or are we at the higher level, where we are being our authentic selves, we're sharing love with one another, and when we see someone daring to be authentic and daring to try something new that is right for who they are, but they're not, it's early days yet, so they haven't mastered this search, that we celebrate that we encourage them, that we recognise the courage the person's taken to do that and daring to follow their heart's desire, and that we celebrate that with one another. We celebrate our achievements, we celebrate the courage to try something new, to try a new creative endeavour that hasn't been done before, rather than being dismissive or critical of it. Obviously there's another video on that in more detail, so I won't go into much more detail than that. The next key date will be the 11th of July. So we have two changes taking place here. First one is that Jupiter is turning direct. So Jupiter's been retrograde since about the 10th of April. Jupiter's now turning direct on the 11th of August, and with Jupiter turning direct, there may be sudden outward rushing of energy or sudden increase in energy directed towards projects that we're working on. So that expansive energy that's being concentrated within us and pushing us to develop more wisdom and understanding, rather than trying to overextend ourselves in the outside external world, if you like. With Jupiter turning direct, it's very important that whatever lessons we learnt about our own personal moral compass, our own personal ethics, and staying true to them, this is a time where we need to make sure that we apply them, and when that energy is going to get released as Jupiter turns direct, that it doesn't all go to the ego and we start acting from the ego again. It's very important that we stay grounded, that we be present, and we don't allow that energy to go to the ego. We keep it in check. We make sure it's being used not just to empower ourselves, but also see the bigger picture and recognise how what we're doing can have a potential impact on other people around us. So remembering that universal level of application, remembering the natural laws that guide everything, and seeking to stay in alignment with them and not just throw it out the window and create karma for ourselves. On the same day, Uranus is turning retrograde in Taurus, and Uranus will be retrograde throughout the rest of the year and will not turn direct again until about the 10th of January in 2020. So Uranus retrograde is all about it's about awakening to the deeper levels of potential that have remained intact, or the deeper level of resources. In Taurus, this is partly about recognizing the untapped resources within ourselves as opposed to the external environment that has gone untried and therefore is just latent potential but not actually being used for anything. And it's also about trying to go through personal awakening about our understanding of what we actually value. Is our values based on a material paradigm that's we've all been indoctrinated into, or do we have our own set of values based on a spiritual understanding and based on this come about through stripping away the conditioning and recognizing the universal values that underpin everything? It's also, with Uranus in Taurus, is about transforming our understanding of our resources and transforming the way we utilize them. It's recognizing where can we use what we already have in order to pursue our goals, or in order to achieve something, rather than having to get new resources from elsewhere. It's looking at how can we share what we have, how can we pool our resources together as communities and create something that will benefit everyone. And I mean, if you think about how many times everyone seems to have the same tools, but most of the time they're sitting down doing nothing, what if we just pulled our resources together and shared them so each person uses it when they need it and then goes back to the collective pot after? What if we shared our efforts, if we worked together towards collective goals and towards achieving collective prosperity rather than just personal prosperity? What if we work towards transforming our values so that we recognise that we're interconnected with everyone else, and therefore it's more important to embrace a community spirit and a humanitarian emphasis that looks at achieving the greatest good for the greatest number of people? This is the kind of goal that Uranus tries to awaken us to. It's to recognise at a deep level that we're all interconnected, and in Taurus it's about transforming our values and transforming the material paradigms that we operate within, and recognise that actually we could achieve a lot more if we stopped thinking to being all about me, myself and I, and instead think about us. What can we do collectively and by sharing our skills and resources with one another in a way that we achieve abundance through working together, and we achieve that synergy that allows something to go much further than it can do for just one person using it, as it were. But as I said, I'll do another video on this in much more detail. On the 15th we have the full moon in Aquarius, so this is an opportunity for us to kind of work on balancing the need to stay true to who we are, so be our authentic self and embrace the divine spark within us, but at the same time it's recognising that the full potential of any creative project needs to be incorporated into groups, as it were. So if each person has their own creative projects or their own creative gifts, we can only achieve real fulfillment or real empowerment collectively if we pull our ideas together, if we unite with like-minded individuals who are united around a similar ethos to each other. Ideally, like we're fortunate at the Magdalene Centre, there's an ethos of love, respect, and sharing what we know and trying to empower one another through that loving spirit and treating each other with dignity and respect without that pressure to be anything other than who we are. It's about finding that balance between staying true to who we are, but also recognising the importance of working within groups in order to fulfil more far-reaching goals that cannot be achieved by an individual on their own. It requires a group of like-minded people coming together in order to achieve a goal that is humanitarian, altruistic, loving, and aligned with the natural laws, as it were, and aligned with the kind of higher vision that is that's guiding humanity at a spiritual level, but we actually have to tune into it and work together in harmony in order to make it manifest here on Earth, as it were. And on the same day, Mercury will be exiting its post-retrograde shadow, so Mercury will be completely out of the retrograde zone from there, so that this will be when there may be even more forward momentum because we're no longer traversing the shadow of Mercury. This is fully direct and full steam ahead, if you like. Obviously, I've already covered the Sun moving into Virgo on the 23rd, so the last aspect in August is going to be on the 30th of August. This is another new moon, this time in Virgo. So this is a black moon here in the UK, though not in America, because they had their black moon in July. But the black moon in Virgo is an opportunity to set new intentions or choose between what level we operate with Virgo. Do we operate at the shadow side, where we're destroying our sense of self-worth by empowering the inner critic, judging ourselves, and from there judging other people by the same standards that we torture ourselves with? Or do we have that humility and that full, complete self-acceptance that allows us to acknowledge when there's areas that we need to work on, but not judge ourselves for it, not criticise ourselves or empower that inner critic, to love ourselves completely and to embrace the areas that need working on and transform them into strengths? And it's also using service as an antidote to suffering. Now, it doesn't mean that it's important that we take care of ourselves in the process, so service should not be used as an escapism tendency to avoid dealing with our own issues, as it were, but service is love in action. But we need to have that love for self first before we can manifest service in its highest form. If we can have that attitude of humility, so we can embrace any feedback or any lessons however they show up, and if we can have that humility to not criticise ourselves, not criticise other people, it's that capacity to interact with other people in a non-judgmental way, and to focus on taking care of ourselves and understanding that if we love ourselves enough to take care of our physical and mental health, we become stronger and better able to help other people. So we can't really help other people if we don't help ourselves, as it were. So the more we take care of ourselves through a healthy diet, getting enough exercise, getting enough rest so that the body can repair itself, and loving ourselves enough to embrace the seeming imperfections that make us, or that are part of human condition, from that place we can freely give and receive love. We can offer assistance to other people. It's important that we're not doing it from a hidden motive of trying to be a saviour. It's more doing it if the person needs help and they either ask for it, or when it's offered they accept it. But if the person doesn't want it, that's fine. It's important we're not trying to seem noble when we're not. It should be service motivated by love and a willingness to help other people. Also respecting boundaries and acknowledging if the person doesn't want it, it could be that they're going through something where they need to learn something themselves, and getting involved may not help them, as it were. So it's having that discernment of recognising when to help and when to step back and just focus on ourselves. And it's making sure that we take good care of ourselves so that we can remain in a position where we can help other people as and when it's required. There's quite a bit to take on board there, but August there's a lot of transformation, a lot of opportunities for transformation, of spiritual alchemy, and I'll go into more detail on that in different reports throughout the month. But this is a month of really getting to understand ourselves at a deeper level through learning the art of just being, where we don't feel like we have to be doing everything. We don't have to be doing something in order to be valued. We don't need other people's validation. We're perfectly happy within ourselves because we're no longer identifying with the ego. We're identifying with the true self. Because when we operate from the true self, love is natural. It's not something we have to think about. It's not something that has to be forced or tried to dredge up. It flows from us anyway, and this is where we need to ideally get to. It's that place where we can just be ourselves, be centered, be calm, have that serenity to deal with things as they arise without being pulled off center. And it's having that love for oneself so that we respect ourselves enough to set boundaries with other people who aren't yet at a level where they appreciate what we're doing, as it were, who we are. It's making sure that boundaries are set so that we don't do something that violates our own personal integrity or violates who we are and is born out of a need for other people's approval. If we love ourselves enough, then chances are we won't really engage in that anyway. It's worth remembering anyway that if we want to be have a truly fulfilling and joyful life, we have to stay true to who we are, and we also have to honour the truth of other people. So it's very important that we stay humble at all times, but the more we can, I guess, approach life with a light-hearted spirit rather than taking everything too seriously, and the more we can learn to laugh at ourselves, laugh at our human foibles and our eccentricities, and just embrace them as part of the journey of life without worrying about how other people judge them. It's having that lightheartedness and not taking ourselves too seriously that it allows us to learn without stressing ourselves out. It allows us to grow without worrying too much or creating unnecessary stress for ourselves, because without that egotistic or ego standard of perfection tormenting us, or that ego need for validation, we lose a lot of the stress in life. We can just enjoy what we're doing. We can help people who want our help, and that help becomes an act of love rather than an act of duty. So it's not something that we're doing because we think we should be doing it. It's because it's something that we're doing as an expression of love. So may the astrology of August bring you many new opportunities for transformation. May it help you to embrace the different parts of self, embrace your own creativity, and learn what it is you want to create, and then later on refine it. And may this be an opportunity to embrace the joy of life, embrace that emotional warmth, that love, that spontaneity, and that encouraging one another to do the best we can to express our creativity and not worry about how other people see it, and to love each other unconditionally, but most importantly love ourselves enough that we won't compromise our sense of, or compromise a true self in order to fit in. We can stay true to who we are in all situations by having that mindfulness of focusing on being rather than acting, and loving ourselves unconditionally so that we don't need love or approval from other people. It's just an additional bonus if people do love us, as it were, but we have that love within us already. We don't need other people to try and top us up because we believe that we don't have it or we're not worthy of it. So may August bring you many blessings. Take care.